On today's episode of Locked On Mets, we will be reviewing all of the latest rumors as it relates to this ball club, such as the Atlanta Braves being out on Jacob DeGrom. Reports indicate they are highly unlikely to sign him. Seth Lugo could be signed as a starter this offseason. A lot to go through on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, there is a report today by Ken Rosenthal that perked my ears up, and I'm sure for a lot of you Mets fans out there, you were pretty excited to hear this news as well. He reported that the Atlanta Braves are highly unlikely to sign Jacob DeGrom this offseason. One of the things that he elaborated on that was to say that no player currently with the Braves will earn more than $22 million over the course of his contract, seemingly creating the flexibility for a major expenditure. But the Braves are reluctant to enter into a deal with any player who takes up too high of a percentage of their payroll, knowing in future seasons the salaries of the young players will rise. A lot of those deals are backloaded, so the idea of signing someone like Jacob DeGrom to a contract north of $40 million could hamstring them as a franchise, which I've only said on this podcast multiple times here that it didn't make sense for the Atlanta Braves to sign Jacob DeGrom because they've never done that. They've never been the team that makes the big free agent splash, and even when it's a Freddie Freeman, they don't meet free agent demands. So this narrative that was built up that DeGrom was going to the Braves, to me, solely came from rumblings that maybe permeated from the Braves fan base. I really don't know where it came from. I think that there was one notion that I could kind of understand, which was that Jacob DeGrom would want to play a little bit closer to his home. And, he lives in Central Florida, so Atlanta would make some sense as it relates to that. And also, I believe they still have their spring training in Orlando, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a little bit of a fit in that regard, but it never made sense with who this team has been. And when they brought back Charlie Morton for $20 million, again, it really didn't seem like it made sense. And also, you look at their rotation, and they got, they have Spencer Strider now. They have Max Fried. They have Charlie Morton. They have Ian Anderson. They have Mike Soroka potentially coming back. They have a ton of depth throughout their 40-man roster when it comes to starting pitching and just pitching as a whole. So never quite made sense. But with that said, does this really make it more likely that the Mets sign Jacob DeGrom? I don't think that this impacts that, so to speak. But it is an interesting thing to think about because look around the league and tell me, who else is signing Jacob DeGrom if not the Mets? Not that other teams wouldn't be interested, but at the dollar that he wants. Now, another note from this article that I found interesting from Ken Rosenthal's reporting, which again, to me, paints a picture that would lead DeGrom back to the Mets. He says, of course, not all clubs will show restraint when it comes to spending. The Mets, Phillies, Cardinals, and Giants are among those indicating a strong willingness to spend, along with the Red Sox, the Rangers, and the Mariners. Let's go through those teams. The Phillies. Could they sign Jacob DeGrom? Possibly. At the same time, they have Zach Wheeler under a big contract. Aaron Nola is due for a contract after this upcoming season. They have Ranger Suarez in place, so that's their big three. They could have a massive need at shortstop. Would they spend on Jacob DeGrom, or would they sign Xander Bogaerts or Carlos Correa? I feel like they're going to shop in the shortstop market to improve that defense, to slide Bryson Stott over to second base. That makes more sense. And I think if they were to sign a free agent, it would probably be someone maybe in that tier B market. I just don't envision them basically spending all of their resources to address their roster at a position where they actually have some strength with their top three in their rotation that was just good enough to get to Game 6 in the World Series. Now, the Cardinals, they have Goldschmidt on the books. They have Arenado on the books. Are they really going to go out and get Jacob DeGrom at that dollar? I think it's more likely if they were to sign a starting pitcher that it would be someone like Carlos Rodon that would come in a little bit cheaper, or even someone below that. Could they just bring back Jose Quintana? They're a team that will spend for the big free agent. Matt Holliday comes to mind, but or even making the trades to acquire guys with big contracts. But the idea that they would be in on DeGrom, I don't buy that one. The Giants, another team that is definitely indicating a willingness to spend. There's been no real signs up to this point that they would be in on Jacob DeGrom. Could it be a case? Absolutely, but it seems like they have their eyes set more towards Aaron Judge. You go to Red Sox, Rangers, Mariners. Red Sox, considering where they're at as a franchise, are they really going to sign Jacob DeGrom? It seems like they're more interested in just bringing back Nathan Eovaldi. The Mariners, they already did their spending when it comes to their rotation with Luis Castillo. So you get to the Rangers, and that's a team that is clearly interested in DeGrom. And we'll get to them in a minute here because I think that is really the chief competition to sign him. You get beyond that, though, you have the Dodgers and Yankees who, as Rosenthal notes, are both approximately $30 million under the luxury tax threshold and are not going to turn into the Pirates or the Athletics either. So they might spend, but he says the biggest difference might be in the way the clubs spend, preferring short-term, high-dollar deals to excessive long-term guarantees. Now, could we see the Dodgers get in the mix for Jacob DeGrom? Absolutely. The Yankees, I guess, are in the mix as well. But considering the Mets seem to be respecting the Yankees' pursuit of Aaron Judge, you would imagine they would return the favor when it comes to DeGrom. When it goes to the West Coast with the Dodgers, could we see them get in the mix? Absolutely. Are they giving him a 4 or 5 year deal? No. I don't think that they are. I think the only teams that would give DeGrom a 4 or 5 year deal are the Mets and the Rangers. And does Jacob DeGrom really want to go to Texas and go into the Astros division? I just don't see it. So, if he's not doing that, if he's not signing there, the only other alternatives, as we just went through, are, maybe the Dodgers or the Giants. Does DeGrom want to go from the East Coast to the West Coast with his family down here? I don't think so. Every road, in my opinion, leads back to Jacob DeGrom signing with the Mets. And you can be upset about that if you are that weird fan that for some reason is so hell-bent against Jacob DeGrom based on the last 16 months that you forgot everything he did for this franchise before it. But to me, the reunion is imminent. It's just a waiting game, I feel like. I feel like the Rangers are going to be that team that's going to drive up the price to the Mets. But I just can't see which team's going to swoop in here. And I might be wrong about that. And if I am, I'll wear it. But it just makes more sense. Not to mention, I talked about Carlos Rodon yesterday. I failed to mention the fact that he has the qualifying offer attached, and that would be a significant loss when it comes to the Mets draft. Based on being luxury tax spenders, they get penalized more when it comes to signing a player who has extended the qualifying offer, so that would make him a little bit less attractive. Justin Verlander would be a nice alternative who does not have a qualifying offer attached. But again, all roads seem to lead back to DeGrom headlining this rotation with Max Scherzer. But will Seth Lugo be a starting pitcher for another team? That's another interesting report we have from free agency. I will dive into that in just a minute. But first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at betonline.net, and if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. We're just speaking about Jacob DeGrom. It's currently plus 100 to sign with the Rangers, if not the Mets, plus 550 for the Dodgers and Braves. And that's apparently highly unlikely, so don't waste your money on that. Plus 600 on the Yankees, and everyone else, the odds are over 1,000. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Seth Lugo is drawing interest from teams to be a starting pitcher, which could mean he's good as gone. I mean, Seth Lugo has long fancied himself a starting pitcher. I wish him the best in that pursuit. I don't know if it's going to work out for him based on the track record, but look, the last time we saw him do it, it was in 2020, a mid-season stretch out to be a starter. That was kind of doomed from the start, didn't look good. His other instances, 2017, he had some run after being good in 2016 as a starter, and I believe he had a little bit more run in 2018 before he was really kind of cemented as a relief pitcher, and I do think that is still his best role, but I don't blame this guy for trying it, right? You look at the market, and relievers are getting paid. I mean, Robert Suarez just got a big contract. Rafael Montero got a big contract. Edwin Diaz got a massive contract. Seth Lugo was not in line to get paid that way. Could he have gotten a nice 3 or 4 year deal as a relief pitcher at a healthy salary? Absolutely. Could he have gotten a shorter term deal as a reliever at a nice salary? Probably. But I think there's just as much possibility that he can get, $6 million maybe to be a starter. Or even if he takes a little bit less than that, if he goes to a team that's guaranteeing him a spot in the rotation, you're going to be right there. If it's a Pirates team, if it's a team like the Orioles who are just looking for some depth, I don't know who's interested. But if it's one of these teams that is looking at Seth Lugo, knowing he's always wanted to start, and saying, all right, we got you. We want you to be in our rotation. You want a chance to be a big league starter. Do it with us this year. I think Seth Lugo's going to jump at that opportunity. And you know what? If he can pull it off, if he can go through next year, be healthy, make 30 starts, and pitch to a 3.8 ERA, he's going to be able to net, at 33 years old next offseason, maybe a 3-year contract at a pretty good number, and he gets to be a big league starting pitcher, which he's always wanted. So I have no problems with that. If he's gone, I think the Mets obviously have a big hole to fill, but they can do that in other ways in free agency or in trade. So it's just interesting to kind of see that there is interest that way for Lugo. And again, I would be a little bit surprised now to see him come back to the Mets, because the Mets aren't going to open that door for him to be a starting pitcher. They haven't over the past couple of years. Now, beyond that, if it comes to the reliever market, you got Suarez signs a 5-year, $46 million contract, so now he's off the books, or off the table. Rafael Montero gets a 3-year, $34.5 million contract that I hate. Really, I hate both of those contracts, to be completely honest. I was really in on Suarez for the Mets, but that is a long-term deal for a guy that basically has one season under his belt at the big league level. You look at, Montero is a year removed from an ERA over 6. I mean, that's a risky signing for 3 years, paying him over 10 a year for a team that's great at finding relief pitchers. Shocking they brought him back at that number. How crazy does this reliever market get from here? And where do you find the value? I think Trevor May is a really, really important guy to bring back, because I just don't see that number climbing super high based on the season he had, but I think his upside's there. Adam Ottavino, do you have to bring him back now? Does he want a multi-year deal? Is David Robertson a guy that you're looking at? I don't know if he'll need a multi-year deal, but he might need a significant contract. If you're already spending all over the place, let's just say you're signing Jacob DeGrom to $45 million per. Does it hurt that much to bring Robertson in for a 1-year, $10 million deal? I don't know, but the Mets have their work cut out for them, and the way this reliever market is moving, you want to jump on these guys. Do the Mets have to jump on Michael Fulmer or Andrew Chafin? There's a lot of names out there, but it's going to get to a point where the good names are going to keep coming off, and you can't go into next season with Drew Smith, Edwin Diaz, the guy that picked up off waivers, Taylor or something, Taylor Cecito. Don't quote me on that one, left-handed reliever. And I don't even know if they really view him as a fixture in the bullpen or not. Got John Curtis. It's thin. So I'm really confused what they're going to do here. But to see those two relievers come off the board and then to know that Seth Lugo is getting interested as a starting pitcher, I just wonder how this market's going to continue to develop because it seems like everyone's trying to grab pitching, which is typical in the offseason. Everyone needs pitching around baseball. But if the Mets don't make some moves, they could be regretting it. If they try to wait out the market, the market might run wild on them. But we'll see what happens. I think it's obviously going to be a key thing to monitor every single week here. Who flies off the board and who can the Mets grab to pair with Diaz. But for our final segment, big day tomorrow. Time to accept qualifying offers for these guys. But also the Mets have to set their 40-man roster. So we could see some guys non-tender. The non-tender deadline is technically the 18th. But a lot of guys could see themselves become free agents tomorrow. So we'll go through the candidates for that for the New York Mets. But first, another word from our sponsors. Qualifying offers must be accepted. And when it comes to the Mets, we already know all three players will decline. Nimmo, DeGrom, top of the market at their respective positions. So they are clearly going to decline it. And reports already came out that Chris Bassett is planning to decline the qualifying offer as well. Now, that does not mean that Bassett can't come back to the Mets on a long-term deal. That's still a possibility, and I think it actually could be a potentially likely one if you look at what else is on the market and if the Mets are looking to run it back. I still could foresee a scenario where the only difference between the Mets rotation this year compared to this upcoming year compared to what it was in 2022 is the loss of Taijuan Walker being replaced by more David Peterson, Tyler McGill, and Joey Lucchesi. And if that's the case, I think you'd be fairly happy. I mean, obviously, Chris Bassett didn't quite show up when it mattered most. Neither did Max Scherzer for that matter, but I think that they're still worthy to bet on. And the more you look at the market, I just don't know what else is out there that you like other than maybe going after the Japanese starter Kodai Senga. Apologize if I mispronounced that name. Other than that, I mean, Martin Perez appears to be accepting the qualifying offer. Nate Eovaldi has a multi-year deal with the Red Sox. Who else is out there? Jose Quintana, Jamison Tyone. Not a lot of guys that are better than Chris Bassett. Really, Bassett, I think, is sort of headlining the Tier B of this market that could be a suitable number 3 starter for the Mets this season. That leads me to Dom Smith and this deadline to clear him on the 40. The Mets aren't in a massive 40-man roster crunch by any stretch of the imagination. But if they are looking to protect a prospect here and there, someone they think can help the team in 2023, Dom Smith could get non-tendered here. I think they got a good sense of the trade value or lack thereof that Dom had at the deadline. So I wonder what's going to happen here. I don't know if they're going to hang on to him and just say, hey, all depth is good depth, and could always non-tender him in spring training if he's not going to make the club. But bringing back Daniel Vogelbach makes Dom Smith very expendable, and if you're not going to be able to move him and he's just going to be taking up a spot in your 40, this might just be the time to let him go, which sucks because I don't understand how you can be a Mets fan and have watched Dom Smith's career and not root for the guy. Such a good dude who really did put a lot of work in, transform his body from what he looked like the first couple of years of his big league career to where he's been the last few, and had really good moments, in 2019 and 2020, and the last 2 years just been a slog for him. So it sucks that he's in this position, but I really do think that he is such a great change of scenery candidate. I think it's one of those moves where he's going to get non-tendered or, we'll get traded at some point this offseason, and then we're going to be looking up in June, and Dom Smith's going to be tearing the cover off the ball for the Pirates or something like that, and fans are going to be like, I can't believe what's happening. Why is Dom like this? Another Met gone that is just proving them wrong and all that. But it's never going to happen here for Dom Smith. I just don't believe it. So I hope he gets that opportunity with another team. I hope he goes somewhere where he gets the chance to play every day and play every day at first base, where that defense can really show. He can bring some value that way. And I think he'll have a good career, but I just don't envision it being with the Mets, as much as I hate to say that. Now, beyond Dom Smith, who else could get non-tendered? I mean, there's a lot of guys you can look at in the bullpen. If it's a Yohan Lopez, Sean Reed-Foley, Steven Nogasek, some of the guys that we've seen a lot of, whose options may be dwindling down. When it comes to the rest of the roster, though, Darin Ruf is the obvious one to think about. He's cheap. He serves a potential role if he can play to the back of his baseball card, particularly what he's done since he came back stateside with the Giants. But it was so bad that I do wonder what the Mets do here. I think that he still has enough value that the Mets can hang on to him and they can find a home for him. Instead of having to eat that money, where you could get that money off the books. Basically trading him for nothing, I would think. Or even I could see a scenario, let's just say you have a contending team, a non-contending team, has a player that's on a contract that's more than Darin Ruf's, where you could trade salaries, right? Where you could say, all right, we'll take on this contract for reliever X that's making $6 million in his final year of arbitration that you don't want to pay, and we'll give you Darin Ruf back. You could take Darin Ruf off our books, and we'll throw in a prospect to make the deal work. That's the type of thing that we could see with Ruf. I don't envision he will be non-tender, but I think it is on the table. James McCann, for that matter, would be a crazy non-tender candidate. The Mets just ate all that money. I don't know what team trades for him, though. So if you really believe in Francisco Alvarez, maybe you do that. But ultimately, why get rid of that depth that you have? Better to hang on to James McCann and DFA him at the end of spring training if you don't think he should break camp with the team. So that is the latest on some of the rumors. Tomorrow's show will be breaking down any big Mets news as it relates to the 40-man roster. Also coming soon, not quite sure if it'll be this week or not, I am working on the top 10 shortstops in all of baseball for Just Baseball, written article I have. And Francisco Lindor is looking towards the top of that list. So I want to really break down why I'm going to place him at number one, more than just my obvious Mets bias. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. This is where you should go to stay up to date with everything going on in the sports world, including instant game reactions, breaking news, and the take of the day. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.